The most important feature of man's future is flexibility. The future, although predetermined in every detail, has many developments. At every moment of our lives, we have before us the choice as to which of the many futures we will have. There are two views of the world possessed by every man, a natural view and a spiritual view. The ancients called one the carnal mind, and the other the Christ mind. We can differentiate them as ordinary consciousness, governed by our senses, and controlled imagination, governed by desire. We can recognize these two distinct centers of thought in the statement, "The natural man comprehendeth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly unto him, neither is he able to understand them, because he can judge of them only by the Spirit." 1 Corinthians 2:14. Natural vision confines reality to the moment called now. According to the natural vision, the past and the future are purely imaginary. On the other hand, spiritual vision sees the contents of time. The past and future are one with the present in spiritual vision. What for the natural man is mental and subjective, for the spiritual man is concrete and objective. The habit of seeing only what our senses allow us to see makes us totally blind to what we would otherwise see. To cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, we should deliberately untangle our minds from the evidence of the senses and focus our attention on an invisible state, mentally perceiving it until it acquires the clarity of reality. Seriously, thinking focused and aimed in a particular direction shuts out the other sensations and makes them disappear. We just have to focus on the desired state in order to see it. The habit of turning our attention away from the sensory region and focusing it on the invisible develops our spiritual vision and enables us to penetrate beyond the world of the senses and see that which is invisible. For from the creation of the world on, his invisible works can be clearly contemplated. Romans 1:20. This vision is totally independent of the natural faculties. Open it up and quicken it. A little practice will convince us that we can, by controlling our imagination, reshape our future in harmony with our desire. Desire is the spring of action. We could not move a single finger until we have the desire to move it. No matter what we do, we follow the desire that dominates our mind at that moment. When we change a habit, our desire to change it is stronger than the desire to keep it. The desires that drive us to action are the ones that hold our attention. A desire is nothing but the awareness of something we lack and want to make our life better. Desires always have some visible gain. The greater the gain, the more intense the desire. There is absolutely no such thing as a non-selfish desire. When there is nothing to gain, there is no desire, and consequently no action. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man in the language of desire. The key to the progress and realization of dreams in life lies in ready obedience to his voice. Obedience without delay to this voice is the immediate conviction of desire realized. To desire a state is to have it. As Pascal said, "You would not have sought me if you had not already found me." Man, by assuming the feeling of his fulfilled desire, and then by living and behaving according to this belief, changes the future in harmony with his belief. Beliefs awaken what they affirm. As soon as man acquires the feeling of his realized desire, his four-dimensional self finds the way to the attainment of this ultimate, discovers methods for its realization. I know of no other clear definition of the means by which we realize our desires than that of experiencing in the imagination what we would experience physically if we reached our goal. This imaginary experience of the goal determines the means. The four-dimensional self therefore constructs with its broad vision the means necessary to achieve the desired end. It is difficult for the undisciplined mind to assume a state denied by the senses. But here's a technique that makes it easy to recall unseen things. That is, to predict an event before it happens. People have a habit of taking simple things lightly. But this simple formula for changing the future was discovered after years of research and experiments. The first step to changing the future is to desire, which is to define your goal, to know for sure what you want. Second, construct an event that you imagine might happen to you following the fulfillment of your desire. an event that involves the fulfillment of the desire, something that will have the action of the predominant self. Third, immobilize the physical body and induce a sleep-like state by imagining yourself asleep. Lie on a bed or relax in an armchair. Then, with your eyelids closed and your attention focused on the action you intend to perform in your imagination, mentally feel yourself right into that action. Imagine at the same time that you are actually performing that action here and now. You must always be a participant in the imaginary action, not just standing back and observing, but feeling that you are actually doing the action so that the imaginary feeling is real. It is important to always remember that the proposed action must be an action that consequences the realization of your desire. Also, you must feel yourself within the action until it takes on the vividness and clarity of reality. For example, suppose you wish for a promotion at work. Receiving congratulations would be an event that would happen to you as a consequence of the realization of your desire. After choosing this as the action that you will experience in your imagination, you immobilize your body, and you induce a state of drowsiness, a sleepy state, but one in which you are still able to control the direction of your thoughts, a state in which you are effortlessly attentive. Then visualize a friend standing in front of you. Place your imaginary hand in his. Feel it solid and carry on an imaginary conversation with him in harmony with action. Don't visualize yourself at a distant point in space and time while you are being congratulated. Instead, bring the elsewhere here and the future now. The future event is reality now in a dimensionally larger world, and strangely enough, the now in a dimensionally larger world is equivalent to the here in the ordinary three-dimensional space of daily life. The difference between feeling yourself in action, here and now, and visualizing yourself in action as if you were on the big screen, is the difference between success and failure. You can understand the difference by visualizing yourself now climbing a ladder. Then, with your eyelids closed, imagine a ladder standing in front of you and perceive yourself actually climbing it. Desire, physical immobility bordering on sleep, and imaginary action in which the self sentimentally dominates the here and now are not only important factors in modifying the future, but are also essential conditions for consciously projecting the spiritual self. When the physical body is still and we are possessed by the idea of doing something, if we imagine that we are doing it here and now, and we hold that imaginary action with increasing feeling until sleep comes, we will seem to wake up outside the physical body in a dimensionally larger world with a dimensionally expanded vision, actually doing what we desired and imagined we were doing. But whether we wake up in this place or not, we're really performing the action in the four-dimensional world, and we're going to redo it in the future here in the three-dimensional world. Experience has taught me to narrow the imaginary action down to condensing the idea that is the object of our meditation into a single gesture, and to repeat it over and over until it takes on the appearance of reality. Otherwise, our attention will wander along a trail of associations, and a multitude of associated images will come into our minds, and in a few seconds take us hundreds of miles away from our target in space, and many years away in time. If we decide to go up a particular flight of stairs, because that is the event that plausibly follows the realization of our desire, then we must restrict the action to going up that particular flight of stairs. If attention should begin to wander, return it to its task of going up the flight of stairs, and continue to do so until the imaginary action has the solidity and clarity of reality. The idea must be maintained without any special effort on our part. We must, with the least effort, permeate the mind with the sensation of desire realized. Drowsiness facilitates change because it promotes effortless attention. It need not be pushed to the state of sleep, in which we would no longer be able to control the movements of our attention, but it should be a moderate level of drowsiness in which we are still able to direct our thoughts. The most profitable way to impersonate a wish is to assume the feeling of the fulfilled wish, and then, in a dormant fulfilled state, repeat over and over like a lullaby any short phrase that implies the fulfillment of the wish, such as, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," until that single feeling of gratitude dominates the mind. Speak these words as if you were addressing them to a higher power that has done this for you. If, however, we seek a conscious projection into a larger dimensional world, we must level up the action until sleep comes. We experience in our imagination what we would feel physically if we achieved our goal, and in time we can feel it physically as we felt it in our imagination. Feed the mind on premises, that is, on assertions presumed to be true, for beliefs, though false, if carried forward to the point of a feeling of reality, will materialize into facts. For a belief, any means that promotes its realization is good. It influences the behavior of all, inspiring in everyone the movements, actions, and words that facilitate its realization. In order to understand how man models the future in harmony with his belief, simply by experiencing in imagination what he would experience in reality if he achieved his goal, we must know what is meant by the dimensionally larger world, for it is into the dimensionally larger world that we go to modify our future. Observing an event before it happens implies that the event is predetermined from the human point of view in the three-dimensional world. So to change the conditions here in the 3 dimensions of space, we must first change them in the 4 dimensions of space. Man does not know exactly what is meant by a dimensionally wider world, and he undoubtedly denies the existence of a dimensionally wider self. He is quite familiar with the 3 dimensions of length, width, and height, and believes that if there were a 4th dimension, it would be as clear to him as those of length, width, and height. But a dimension is not a line. It is any way of measuring things that is totally different from all other ways. That is, to measure a solid 4-dimensionally, we simply measure it in every direction except length, width, and height. Is there any other way to measure an object except by length, width, and height? Time measures my life without employing the 3 dimensions of length, width, and height. There is no such thing as an instantaneous object. Its appearance and disappearance are measurable. It lasts for a specific amount of time. We can measure its lifespan without using the dimensions of length, width, and height. Time is ultimately a 4th way of measuring an object. The more dimensions an object has, the more substantial and real it becomes. A straight line, which lies entirely in one dimension, acquires form, mass, and substance with the addition of dimensions. What new quality would time, or the 4th dimension, bring to an object, so as to make it as superior to solids as solids are 2 surfaces and surfaces are 2 lines? Time is a means of changing experience, since all change requires time. The new quality is mutability. Observe that if we section a solid, its section will be a surface. Sectioning a surface, we get a line, and sectioning a line, we get a point. This means that a point is nothing but the section of a line, which in turn is nothing but the section of a surface, which in turn is nothing but the section of a solid, which in turn, coming to the logical conclusion, is nothing but the section of a 4-dimensional object. We cannot avoid the inference that all 3-dimensional objects are nothing more than sections of 4-dimensional bodies. Which means, when I meet you, I meet a section of your 4-dimensional self, that 4-dimensional self that is invisible. In order to see the 4-dimensional self, I have to look at every section or moment of your life from birth to death, and see them all as coexisting. My vision should encompass the entire assortment of sensory impressions you have experienced on Earth, plus those you have yet to experience. I should see them not in the order in which you experienced them, but as a whole. Since change is the hallmark of the 4th dimension, I should see them as a flow, a living, breathing whole. Now, if we have clearly fixed all of this in our minds, what does this mean for us in this 3-dimensional world? It means that if we can move along the timeline, we can see the future and change it if we want to. This world, which we hold to be so solidly real, is only a shadow out of which and beyond which we can move at any moment. It is an abstraction of a more fundamental and dimensionally large world, a more fundamental world abstracted from an even more fundamental and large world, and so on ad infinitum. Because the absolute is unattainable by any means or analysis, no matter how many dimensions we add to the world. Man can prove the existence of a dimensionally larger world simply by focusing his attention on an invisible state and imagining that he sees and hears it. If he remains focused in this state, his present environment would vanish, and he would awaken to a dimensionally larger world in which the object of his contemplation would be visible as a concrete, objective reality. I intuitively feel that if he were to abstract his thoughts from this dimensionally wider world and retreat even further into his mind, he would once again cause an externalization of time. He would find that whenever he withdraws within his mind and causes an externalization of time, space becomes dimensionally wider. And he would conclude that both time and space are serial, and that the drama of life is but the scaling of a multidimensional block of time. Scientists will one day explain why there is a serial universe. But in practice, knowing how we use this serial universe to change the future is more important. To change the future, we only need to deal with two worlds in this infinite series: the world we know through our physical organs, and the world we perceive independently of them. I have stated that man has at every moment before him the choice of which of numerous futures will be his. But a question arises: how is this possible if man's experiences in a three-dimensional world are predetermined, which his observation of an event before it happens implies? This ability to change the future can be explained if we compare the experiences of life to this printed page. Man experiences events on Earth individually and in succession, in the same way you are now seeing the words on this page. Imagine that each word on this page represents a single sensory impression. To get the context, to understand what I mean, focus your view on the first word at the top left, and then move your view across the page from left to right, letting it linger on the words individually and in succession. By the time your eyes have reached the last word on the page, you will have grasped the meaning. But imagine that as you look at the page with all its printed words, you decide to rearrange them. You could, by rearranging them, tell a totally different story. In fact, many different stories. A dream is nothing more than uncontrolled four-dimensional thinking, that is, the rearrangement of past and future sensory impressions. Man rarely dreams events in the order in which he experiences them when awake. He usually dreams of two or more events, which are separated in time, fused into a single sensory impression, or rather he completely rearranges the sensations so that he does not recognize them when he encounters them while awake. For example, I dreamt that I was delivering a package to the restaurant in my building. The waitress said to me, "You can't leave it there," after which the elevator operator gave me some letters, and as I thanked him too. At that point, the night elevator operator appeared and waved at me. The next day, as I was leaving the apartment, I picked up some letters placed under my door. On the way down, I tipped the daytime elevator operator and thanked him for the mail, after which he thanked me for the tip. On the way home, I heard the doorman say to a delivery man, "You can't leave that there." As I was about to take the elevator, I was drawn to a familiar face in the restaurant, and as I looked in, I saw the waitress greet me with a smile. That evening, I walked the guests I had had for dinner to the elevator, and as I greeted them, the night operator waved to me. By simply rearranging some of the feelings I was destined to experience and blending them into a single impression, I constructed a dream that was a little different from my actual experience. When we have learned to control the movements of our attention in the four-dimensional world, we should be able to consciously create circumstances in the three-dimensional world. We learn this control by means of daydreaming, in which we can maintain attention effortlessly, for effortless attention is essential to changing the future. We can, in a controlled daydream, consciously construct an event that we wish to experience in the three-dimensional world. The sensory impressions we use to construct our daydream are true realities dislocated in time or in the four-dimensional world. All we do in constructing our daydream is to select from the vast array of sensations those which, correctly arranged, imply that we have fulfilled our desire. With this clearly defined dream, we relax in an armchair and induce a sleep-like state of consciousness. A state which, although bordering on sleep, allows us conscious control of the movements of our attention. So we experience in imagination what we would experience in reality if this daydream were an objective fact. In applying this technique to change the future, it is important to always remember that the only thing that occupies the mind during daydreaming is the open-eye dream, the predetermined actions and sensations that imply the realization of our desire. How the dream becomes fact is not our problem. Our acceptance of the dream as physical reality will determine its fulfillment. Let me once again remind you of the basics of prayer, which is nothing more than a controlled daydream. 1. Define your goal. Know definitively what you want. 2. Construct an event that you know would happen to you as a consequence of the fulfillment of your desire, something that will have the action of the predominant self, an event that involves the fulfillment of your desire. 3. Immobilize the physical body and induce a sleep-like state of consciousness. So, mentally feel yourself in the proposed action until the single feeling of accomplishment dominates the mind. Meanwhile, imagine that you are actually doing the action here and now so that you feel in your imagination what you would physically feel if you achieved your goal. Experience has convinced me that this is the easiest way to achieve our goal. However, my own failures would betray me if I claimed to have complete mastery of the movements of attention. But as the ancients put it, this is all I do, forgetting the past and leaning toward the future, running toward the goal to get to the prize. Letter to the Philippians. Once again, I want to remind you that the responsibility for making what you want in the world real is not on your shoulders. Don't worry about how. When you are convinced that what you want has been done, the conviction has its own way of objectifying itself. All responsibility for making it possible is removed from you. There is a short statement in the book of Exodus that expresses this. Millions of people who have read it or quoted it over the centuries have completely misunderstood it. It states, "Do not cook the kid in its mother's milk." In the King James Version, "Thou shalt not boil the kid in his mother's milk." Exodus 23:19. Countless millions of people, misunderstanding this statement, until now, the enlightened era of 1948, have not eaten dairy products along with meat. It doesn't work that way. They believe that the Bible is history, and when it says, "Thou shalt not cook the kid in his mother's milk," they will not eat milk and dairy products, such as butter and cheese, along with a plate of kid or other meat. They even have separate dishes in which they cook the meat. But now you have to apply it psychologically. You have done your meditation, and you have convinced yourself that you are what you want to be. Consciousness is God. Your attention is like the river of life, or the milk itself which nourishes and keeps alive that which has your attention. In other words, what has your attention has your life. Throughout the ages, the kid has been used as a symbol of sacrifice. You have given life to everything in your world. But there are things you no longer wish to keep alive, even though you have raised them. You are a jealous father who can easily devour his children, like Kronos. It is your right to destroy what you previously wanted when you did not know it well. Now you have detached yourself in consciousness from that previous state. It was your kid. It was your child. You embodied it and expressed it in your world. But now that you have convinced yourself that you are what you wish to be, do not look back at your former state, wondering how it will disappear from your world. For if you look back and pay attention to him, you are once again stewing that kid in his mother's milk. Do not say to yourself, "I wonder if I have really departed from that state," or, "I wonder if this and this is true." Give all your attention to the conviction that it is so, for all responsibility for making it so has been removed from you. You do not have to make it so, it is so. Appropriate what is already a fact, and live in the conviction that it is, and in a way that you don't know, I don't know, nobody knows, it objectifies itself in your world. Don't worry about the how, and don't think back to your previous state. No one who has put his hand to the plow and then turns back is fit for the kingdom of God. Luke 9:62. Simply convince yourself that this is done and suspend reason. Suspend all arguments of the conscious three-dimensional mind. Your desire is beyond the reach of the three-dimensional mind. Convince yourself that you are what you want to be. Live as if you are. And as you hold on to that belief, it will materialize. Questions and answers on the law of attraction and creative power. 1. Question: What is the meaning of the symbol on the covers of your books? Answer: it is an eye placed on a heart, which in turn is placed on a tree laden with fruit, which means that whatever you are aware of and accept as true, you will realize. What a man has in his heart is. 2. Question: I would like to get married, but I haven't found the right man. How can I imagine myself a husband? Answer: always follow your ideals, for it is the ideal state that captures the mind. Do not limit the state of marriage to a certain man, but to a full, rich, and abundant life. What you desire to experience is the joy of marriage. Do not modify your dream, but improve it by making it more enjoyable. After that, condense your desire into a single feeling, or an act that implies its fulfillment. In this Western world, the woman wears her wedding ring on the ring finger of her left hand. Being a mother does not imply being married. Intimacy does not imply being married. But a wedding ring does. Relax in a comfortable chair or lie on your back as if you were about to fall asleep. Then assume the feeling of being married. Imagine a wedding ring on your finger. Touch it. Spin it around your finger. Slide it over the knuckle. Persevere in this action until the ring takes on a distinct and realistic feel. Lose yourself in the feeling of having the ring on your finger so much that when you open your eyes, you will be surprised not to see it there. If, on the other hand, you are a man who does not wear a wedding ring, you might imagine a greater responsibility. How would you feel, for example, if you had a wife to support? Assume now the feeling of being a happily married man. 3. Question: what do I have to do to get the kind of creative inspiration it takes to write? Answer: what do you have to do? Imagine that the story has already been written and accepted by a major publishing house. Reduce the idea of being a writer to the feeling of satisfaction. Repeat the phrase "that's great" or "thank you, thank you, thank you" over and over again until you feel you've succeeded. Or imagine a friend congratulating you. There are countless ways that success is implied, but you always come to the end. If you accept the end, it will come true. Don't think about getting into the proper state of mind to write, but live and act as if you are now yourself the author you wish to be. Suppose you have the talent of writing. Think about the model you want to show on the outside. If you write a book and no one wants to buy it, you have no satisfaction. Act like people are dying to read your work. Live as if you can't write stories or books fast enough to meet the demand. Persevere in this belief, and whatever you need to achieve your goal will quickly blossom, and you'll be able to express it. 4. Question: how do I envision a larger audience at my conferences? Answer: I answer you by sharing the technique used by a very skilled professor I know. When this man first came to our country, he began giving speeches in a small hall in New York City. Even though only 50 or 60 people were present at his Sunday morning meetings, and they occupied only the first few rows, this professor would come on stage and imagine a large audience. Then he would say to the empty rows, "Can you hear me in the back there?" Today, this man lectures at Carnegie Hall in New York for about 2,500 people every Sunday morning and Wednesday evening. He wanted to speak to the crowds. He wasn't being modest. He was not kidding himself. But he imagined a crowd in his own consciousness, and the crowd came. So stand up in front of a large audience. Address this audience in your imagination. Feel as if you were on that stage, and your feeling will provide the means. 5. Question: is it possible to imagine many things at one time? Or should I limit my imagination to one desire? Answer: I personally prefer to limit my imaginative act to a single thought, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop there. During the day, I can imagine many things, but instead of imagining many small things, I suggest you imagine something so large that it includes all those small things. Instead of imagining having wealth, health, and friendships, imagine being enthusiastic. You could never be enthusiastic and in pain at the same time. You could never be enthusiastic and have received an eviction threat. You could never be enthusiastic if you weren't enjoying so much friendship and love. What might it feel like to be enthusiastic without knowing what it is that produced your enthusiasm? Reduce the idea of enthusiasm to a single feeling. Isn't that great? Don't allow the rational mind to ask why, for if it does, it will start looking for a visible cause, and the feeling will be lost. Rather, repeat to yourself over and over again, isn't it great? Suspend judgment as to what it is that is great. Catch a single sensation of all that is awesome, and things will happen to you that attest to the truth of that sensation. And I promise you that it will include all those little things. 6. Question: how many times should I perform the imaginative act? For a few days or for many weeks? Answer: in the book of Genesis, the story is told of Jacob fighting with an angel. This story gives us the clue we are looking for, which is that when satisfaction is achieved, it is followed by powerlessness. When you get the feeling of reality, at least at that moment, you are mentally powerless. The desire to repeat the prayer vanishes, for it has been replaced by the feeling of accomplishment. You cannot insist on wanting what you already have. If you imagine yourself to be what you desire to be until the rapture, you no longer desire it. Your imaginative act is a creative act similar to that of a man who stops, kneels down, and receives a blessing. For as man creates his own likeness, so your imaginative act takes on the likeness of your ideal. If, however, you fail to reach the point of satisfaction, repeat the action again and again, until you feel that you have reached it, and virtue has left you. 7. Question: I was taught not to ask for earthly things, only spiritual growth, yet what I need is money and things. Answer: you have to be honest with yourself. In the Holy Scriptures, the question, "What do you want from me?" is always asked. Some wanted to see, some wanted to eat, some wanted to be healed, or asked, "May my son live?" Your greater self speaks to you through the language of desire. Do not deceive yourself. Keeping in mind what you want, claim to have it already, for your Father will take pleasure in giving it to you, and remember, what you desire you will have. 8. Question: once we have assumed our desire, should we always keep in mind the presence of this greater self that protects and fulfills our desire? Answer: acceptance of the end will give you the means. Assume the feeling of fulfillment of your desire, and your greater self will determine the means. When you have appropriated a state as if you have already realized it, your daily activity will distract your mind from anxious thoughts, so that you are not constantly looking for a signal. You don't have to constantly think that some presence will do something on your behalf, but rather you have to know that it has already done it. Knowing what you want is already a fact. Live as if it is, and things will happen to make it real. Don't worry that there may be a presence that does something for you. The deeper, greater you has already done it. All you have to do is go to the place where you will meet it. Remember the story of the man who returned from his master's house and met the servant who said to him, "Your son is alive." And when he asked him at what hour he was healed, the servant replied, "At 7 o'clock. The very hour he had believed in the fulfillment of the wish, it had been fulfilled, for it was at 7 o'clock that his master had said to him, "Thy son shall live." Your wish is already fulfilled. Act as if it were, and although time passes slowly in this dimension of your being, it will nevertheless bring you confirmation of your supposition. I ask you, however, not to be impatient. If there is only one thing you really need, it is patience. 9. Question: isn't there a law that says you can't get anything for nothing? Must we not earn what we desire? Answer: creation is finished. It is your Father's pleasure to give you his kingdom. The parable of the prodigal son is the answer you seek. Despite man's squandering, the moment he remembered who he really was, he fed on the fatted calf and put on the robes and ring of authority. There is nothing to be gained. Creation ended when time was invented. You, as man, are God who made himself visible for the purpose of showing what is, not what will be. Don't think you have to work hard and sweat to be saved. The harvest is 4 months away. The fields are already blond. You just have to sink your scythe into them. 10. Question. But doesn't the thought that creation is finished rob us of our initiative? Answer. If you can observe an event before it happens, it means that the event that is going to happen must be predetermined from the point of view of the person living in this three-dimensional world. Yet it is not necessary for you to encounter such an event. By changing your concept of you, you can interfere with your future and shape it in harmony with your new concept of you. 11. Question. But doesn't this ability to change the future deny the fact that creation is finished? Answer. No. By changing your concept of you, you change your relationship to things. If in a game you change the order of the letters to form a new word, you have not created new words, you have simply had the pleasure of rearranging the letters. Your concept of you determines the order of events that happen to you. Events have existed since the birth of the world, but not their temporal arrangement. 12. Question. Why is it that those who apply themselves hard in metaphysics always seem to lack something? Answer. Because he didn't really apply metaphysics. I'm not talking about a cowardly approach to life, but a daily application of the law of consciousness. Once you appropriate your desire, you don't need a person or state to act as a conduit to make it happen. Living in a man's world, I need money in my everyday life. If I invite you to lunch tomorrow, I have to pay the bill. When I leave a hotel, I have to pay the amount. To take the train to New York, I have to buy the train ticket. I need money, and this must be there. I will not say, God knows I need money. Rather, I will make that money my own as if it were really there. We must live courageously. We must live as if we own what we want to own. Don't think that just because you've helped others, someone else will see your good deed and somehow help you with your problems. There is no one else who will do it for you. You yourself must courageously appropriate what your Father has already given you. 13. Question. Can an uneducated person self-educate by assuming the feeling of being educated? Answer. Yes. Great interest is rewarded with information from all over. You must sincerely desire to be well educated. The desire to be a good reader, followed by the assumption that you already are, makes you selective in your reading. As your education increases, you will automatically become more selective, more critical in everything you do. 14. Question. My husband and I are taking his class together. Should we discuss our desires with each other? Answer. There are 2 spiritual sayings in the Bible. One is, tell no one. The other is, I have told you now before it comes to pass, that when it comes to pass, you may believe. It takes spiritual courage to tell another person that your wish has come true before you can perceive it externally. If you do not possess this kind of courage, you would do well to keep quiet. Personally, I like to tell my wife about my plans because then both of us are so excited when they come true. Usually the first person a man wants to prove this law to is his wife. Muhammad is said to be eternally great because his first disciple was his wife.